It's the Dev Friday Show with Mark and Tim.
It is, and this week I think I've twisted all the dials. I have hit recorded, and it does not look like Mark has cut himself shaving. So we are on point. And I just we did not do a show last week because I was out, and I realized, looking back at my Twitter direct messaging feed, that I would have been able to wish you a early happy birthday because your birthday coincided not with the last Friday, but a day right next to it. I won't say which because I know how guarded you are about such private information. But happy birthday, Mark! A little belated. So.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been a big couple 2 weeks, Tim, and I missed you.
Yeah. Did you have a good time celebrating your birthday?
No, it wasn't too bad. All
right.
It's another year getting older. Another year I don't want to remember getting older, but yeah, kind of crossing that threshold. You know what I mean?
Happens to all of us. At least that's what I've been told. So I had a bunch of questions.
At least I have you to be the younger version of myself that I hope to be. Because it seems like all my friends are older than me. So what they do is when my birthday comes around, they ask me what my age is. Oh my gosh, you're so young. I'm like, oh my gosh. Jeez. And I feel so old.
Why am I hanging out with all these old people? What is up with this? What is up with this? Well, and I mean, this is have kids. They keep you young. At least that's what they tell me.
Or keep having kids.
Or keep having kids. They keep keeps you young. So I had a kid. We've done this over a year now, episode 43, even though that doesn't show because of the fact that we take breaks and stuff. Mm-hmm. We've done it more than a year. We're coming in. I don't remember. Did we do a Black Friday episode last year? I probably asked you these questions last year, too. Do you go out do you do the shopping on Black Friday?
That's a very interesting question. I used to. There was a couple of years that I would kind of, search out the deals, watch for them, and then kind of do that. But I don't know. I stopped. I was I think we talked about this. I was a big Christmas Eve guy.
Oh, that's right. We did. You go out and you buy all the presents that you can on Christmas Eve.
I enjoyed the challenge of hunting during Christmas Eve. And then after a few years of that, I was like, all right, I'm done with this. I'm just going to order everything on Amazon, be early, and just be done with it.
Cyber Monday, right?
Yep.
Cyber Monday. I know there's been a couple times that we went out. There was one time we wanted to get kitchen. This was very early in our marriage. We wanted to get the KitchenAid mixers for both of our moms. So we went out to Kohl's and braved that, and it is insane when they open the doors and let you in. At least it was. Beating people off of different things. It was crazy. But now, some of the stores don't even close. They just roll right in. It's like, okay, at 6 o'clock we're gonna unwrap this pallet of crap, and you guys can get it. And then at 7 o'clock this one gets it. And Walmart now has Black Friday, I think, going on now on Mondays. And if you're a Walmart Plus subscriber, which I happen to be for reasons other than
Black
Friday.
What does the Walmart Plus subscription give you, Tim? What is the benefits, the perks?
I knew that this is the riveting developer-oriented content that everybody comes to this podcast for. Good question. For us, well, what is it really? I think for us it's the scan and go part of it. We love now. If you've ever been a Sam's Club member, you know that Sam's Club has scan. Well, maybe you don't. The scan and go is where you can just take your phone out at Sam's Club and scan stuff.
Okay.
And then if you know how Sam's Club works, most of those kind of member clubs, you go through the checkout, and then even at the door, there's someone scanning your receipt to make sure you actually paid for stuff. And I don't know why they do it there that way, but that's how Sam's Club works. So you just skip the register and you go up to that person who's gonna scan you as you go through the door just to make sure your receipt matches the stuff that's in your cart, and they just scan your phone, and because you basically pay with the phone, and you get a receipt right there. They scan the phone, say, "Yep, you actually paid for it. You're done." Okay. Walmart's a little bit different, and I wish they would give you one of those self-pay kiosks that was just all by itself right by the door. With the Walmart app, you scan things as you put them in the cart. And then you still have to go up to the kiosk. And if you've been to Walmart recently or you have the app, there's a little QR code on the screen where you can pay with what they call Walmart Pay, which is really just...
Did you give Walmart your credit card information, Tim?
Mark, you're giving them that every time you buy something there. You realize that, right? That is what...
Isn't it encrypted? When I shove the chip in, or if I swipe it, isn't that that
I guess
the number encrypted?
Yes, I guess there's an argument that yes, Walmart now has more control over my credit card than it did. It is a credit card from Walmart though. So
Okay.
it's
Wow,
the,
you're just going up the stack. You're
I
just
know,
like,
right? Come on. It's Walmart. They know everything about me anyway. What am I trying to hide from them exactly? I
the
mean,
only thing you haven't matched is doing some PHP consulting for Walmart.
not yet. I know people who do, but but I think they send you a laptop, and I'm not into that. I'm not into
really?
like the whole you have to do. That's very corporate. I understand it, but like I don't like that. Anyway, you know what? I remember reading in like I don't know. It's in a doctor's office. So what would that be? U.S. News and World Reports. One of those magazines that are always in doctors' offices. Reading something about the retail. What do I want to say? The way that they manage their retail locations and how it's unique. It was really unique back in the day because when Walmart first started opening stores across the country, they would bring back the store managers to Bentonville every Friday. So if you were, like how do they keep consistency across so many stores
Oh,
across
okay.
the
That makes
country?
sense.
It's
Yeah.
because the managers were all meeting in one room every day, like in a big room, obviously. But like there, it was communication that way. And back then, that was the best way probably to do that type of communication. Now I'm almost positive that is not what happens. And in fact, there was once upon a time that Walmart did not sell anything. It did not sell in all of its stores. Those in the Philadelphia area, you realize that there were years that Walmart did not carry Tastykakes because Tastykake would not sell outside of that region. They wouldn't sell to all of Walmart. They would just sell. They didn't want the distribution nightmare because when you work with Walmart, I believe you do the distribution. They're big enough. You're gonna play. You're gonna deal with us. We're gonna tell you how you're gonna get it to us.
Well,
And
interesting.
Tasty-
Haven't they like kind of modeled Amazon now? Because they saw the success of Amazon's
Well, they've changed.
distribution.
They've changed some of these
Yeah.
policies
Oh,
years
that was
ago.
back again.
Yeah. Now you will have regional things that are in different WalMarts that only you can find in one region, and they've changed that. But just the evolution of how they work with their in the retail space, and at least at the time of this article, the fact that different managers over different departments totally had the power to change pricing to try to move product in their own department. And I remember just the one thing that I thought was interesting in that article was the price tag that they put on anybody who walked through the door. They looked at every person who walked through a door with the idea that is, I think it was $250,000, is on average over a lifetime what a person spends at Walmart.
That would be amazing if Walmart had like a video system where they could just watch people walking through the stores and there was a little number on top of their heads. Just so you
Like
could
what
see,
like the
which,
Amazon
which
value?
apparently in your case that'd be pretty easy since everything you do financially
exactly.
runs through Walmart. They'd be able to
for sure.
show that number
For sure.
to see
Walmart-
how much of a value you are as a customer.
I believe
to
that
their
is
platform.
what Amazon does, though, right? When you contact Amazon customer service, I am pretty sure there is something by your user that shows your value relative, relative to other customers. I don't think it's a monetary value, but like if you spend a lot of money on Amazon, I do believe you get better customer service. I believe their algorithms say, they said there's something wrong with it and we're not sure. Fine, give them a refund. Who cares? Just give it to them. Because they are actually spending money on our platform. They bought one thing once 3 years ago, and now they're saying they want to return it because it failed. Maybe not. I think they have that kind of built in there. But anyway, back to the Walmart app. Yes. You scan it with. What does this? Oh, I was saying Walmart Pay. Yeah, if you go up to the self-checkouts, you'll see there's a QR code that you can use Walmart Pay where you just scan your Walmart app and it uses whatever credit card you have on file there. It's like that where if you scanned everything that you put in your cart, then you just scan the QR code and it checks you out because it knows what's in your cart. And if something's weird and it doesn't work because you can't use that system on the phone or something like that, you can actually scan the QR code and it will transfer your entire scan to the kiosk like you had scanned it. But that's not quite as efficient. And the value there for us is, think about it from an efficiency standpoint. People who like lean manufacturing and they'd be like, you're taking something off the shelf, you're putting it into a cart. Then you're taking it out of the cart and you're scanning it and you're putting it in a bag. Then you're taking the bag off of the thing and you're putting it back in the cart. And then you're going to your car and then you're taking the bag out of the cart and putting it into your car. And then you're going home and you're taking the bag out of your vehicle and taking it inside and then taking the item out of the bag. Okay, could we make that more efficient? Sure. What if we just took it and didn't put it in a plastic bag, we put it in like a grocery shopping bag right into the cart, didn't have to take it out of the cart again until we just took that bag and put it in our vehicle, used the bag to transfer from the vehicle to the house. Yeah, there's so many steps that you remove from that by not having to take every item out and scan it after you already collect it. So for us, it's really nice.
I know,
Scan
just
it, put it in there.
just listen to this conversation just feels like my privacy is being infringed, and somehow
You're the guy who
just
doxed
listening to how
himself. You doxed yourself.
all this information to Walmart and how Walmart just kind of knows everything about you.
You don't think they already do that? I mean, unless you are paying cash, unless you're paying cash as you check out of Walmart, they know the device. The
I know. Well, they could.
Use.
I know, and they can. Well, just be because they. Well, I like the fact like when I go to Home Depot remembers me and saying, "Oh, would you like to send you this receipt to your email address digitally?" I'm like, "Oh, I always appreciate that." Well, the reason why they know that is because they keep track of my credit card number and associate my email address to that.
They have the last 4 digits, and they're like, "Oh, it's Mark buying stuff again."
Yeah.
I mean, they all do that, and it's both. I mean, it's you can not like the privacy infringement on one side, but on the other side, they're looking and saying customers that shop here frequently buy these things. Maybe we should make sure they're always in stock. So like from a commerce standpoint, they're able to use that data to hopefully provide a better experience to you. But at the same time, you realize that they're using that data to their advantage, obviously.
That's all that Walmart hopes is just trying to how can we provide a better experience for our customers, not how we could save and make more money.
I think they look at it both ways.
But it makes me think about because retail is hard. Did you ever have like a retail job?
No.
So I worked my first job.
Thankfully,
my first real job when I was a kid, besides having like a paper route and doing some odd jobs here and there, was working for a drugstore. I think it was like I think it was Rite Aid, like early on, like Rite Aid or another brand. I can't actually. I think it was like close to Rite Aid. No, it's like there was another brand, and it's escaping me right now. But I worked there for probably about a year and a half, 2 years. While I was in school, like during after hours, after school, and then over the summertime. And that was like especially hard around the holidays because you get hammered, right? And you're working long hours. The stores are crammed. You're constantly working the register, and it makes me think. Who do you feel worse for?
Grumpy customers too? You get grumpy customers?
And who do you feel worse for? Do you feel worse for retail employees during the holidays or Twitter employees?
Right now? Like right at this moment? Wow, you're going to bring it back there, aren't you? I have no idea.
I was feeling bad for Twitter. And because like
really?
I talked about how I have a friend who works at Twitter and she was actually kept on because I think 2 weeks ago before we had the show, actually, I messaged her. She got back to me and says, "Yep, I made it through. I'm still there. I was, took a week off to kind of like, wrap my head around this, but I'm still going to be, on the developer team at Twitter." And then I saw the news break last night about how like there's this mass exodus.
Mass. Yeah.
So of so many employees, and I saw her. She tweet. She said, "Yeah, she was part of it. She signed up for it." And it made me feel kind of bad. I was like, "Wow, that's actually kind of a risky move. Like leaving the company, like a good, well-paying company, for in this economy too, where everybody's like either laying off or, especially in the tech space, where either all the tech companies are laying off employees or doing hiring freezes. That's kind of a tough time." And I was like, "Wow, that's kind of bold to do that." And but then I read a news article in New York Times about how it went down, because Musk sent an email out Wednesday night saying, "Okay, here's a form. You got to fill it out. If you fill out this form, you're signing up for the way I'm asking you to work. You're going to work extremely hard. You're going to be full time on the company, and you're going to come into the office and like all these stipulations. And if you don't sign this form, then you're going to leave the company, but with 3 months severance." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So that's kind of how it went down. So it wasn't really mass, in a sense, it was a mass resignation, but it was kind of like,
right. I didn't follow the article, but I got that feel like it was an email that says you can either sign up for this or not. And a lot of people are like, "Well, I'm opting out." Because the truth is, if that was what was put in front of me, I'd be like, "No, I'm done." Mm-hmm. Like I have other things than work that are important to me. So sorry, work is not my passion and the meaning of my life.
But it is nice having the 3 months of
3
pay.
months severance
delay.
isn't bad.
Because when
Yeah.
I've quit a job, I've never the company's ever like said, okay, we'll pay you for 3 months just because we like you.
Never, you never had that happen. No, not at Rite Aid.
And the only time I got laid off from a company was in college. I was working as it was a part-time job doing some design, graphic design for a company. And, they just laid me off because they didn't need my, service anymore, and they're doing some cutbacks. But yeah, that was kind of the only time in my career that that I got laid off. I've definitely quit a bunch of jobs, but to take another job.
You quit the startup. You didn't run out of money there. I forget.
Well, in the startup, yes, you run out of money, you stop getting paid, but you still work for the startup. You're still doing work. But then as you realize, well, they're not paying me, and the work starts to kind of slow down in the sense of how much you're actually contributing, because you actually need to start doing work for other people in order to make money.
You don't count that as a layoff.
No, I don't. No.
Okay, that's fine. Because
I could have kept on. No, I could have kept on.
Yeah.
Because they didn't implode in a sense. Like, I was the fact of like, okay, I need to either go get a full-time job, because that's what the point I was at financially. I was like, okay, I've been trying to make it by working on the startup part-time, but also doing contract work on the side. And I was like, okay, I can't be splitting my time just financially, and also I just need to. So actually, that's brought me back to teaching. So it's like, oh, the school offered me a temporary full-time job. I was like, all right, let me go back to teaching. That kind of will give me a nice transition. Then I can maybe do teaching for a couple of years.
Temporary full-time job.
Yeah, I thought I was just going to do for a couple of years and then go back and in the industry. But I was like, no.
And here he is, tenured in his temporary position.
Got comfortable, Tim.
Yeah, that's what they do with those.
But
nice
this week was an amazing week, Tim.
Was it? I was going to talk about the time I was laid off, but you go ahead.
Okay, I don't want to pass this up, because I do want to hear about how when somebody laid you off.
I was just reviewing in my head how, like, okay, so you got laid off once. I'm thinking, well, I mean, most of like my professional, like in programming career, for the most part, I've been a contract developer, so you don't really get laid off. The contract just ends. Or you quit. There's been probably a couple clients that I've been like, no, thank you, but no. In fact, wow, I've even had clients that I didn't like. They pitched me on an idea, and I was like, no, I don't want to work for you. And they're like, what do you mean you don't want to work for me? Like, they were upset. They're like, what we're doing is legal. I'm like, I don't care if it's legal. I don't want to do it. I don't know. Why wouldn't you work with us? Because I don't want to. That's why. How about that? Maybe this conversation right here is an indicator of why I do not want to work with you. Other than that, so I was thinking there was a startup, but if we're not counting startups that run out of money as a layoff because they just run out of money, then that one doesn't count. But I'm thinking back through my career, and yes, it was my first tech job that I got, I guess, laid off, kind of, in a way. So it was a web hosting company that was completely a subsidy. So it was completely owned by a drywall company.
Really?
Right.
That's
And the drywall company went under because they had too much money on the street. In other words, they were paying their workers, but they weren't being able to get the accounts receivable in. So they couldn't make payroll. So it was an interesting drywall company that was actually at one point in time, it was a division of a larger drywall company that got split up between 3 foremen or something like that. And it was that the original owner or one of the other foremen came and bought it out. And I think, like a normal person, they said, I don't think we need a web hosting company as part of our drywall company. Maybe we should just shut that down. And that's how I got laid off there. So
maybe it was the same web hosting company that I applied for a developer job for way back in 2005 or I don't know, something around there.
No, we were gone before then.
And it was a small company, and I was actually interested in doing. So I was like, oh, it kind of falls in line with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's kind of it was kind of like a second or third job after my first job out of college that I worked at for 5 years. So I was looking to kind of transition. And I was really interested in the company. It's a small web hosting company, and they've been around for a bit, and they wanted a developer and doing a lot of server-side programming. So I was super into it. But then when it came down to the salary, I was like, no.
Super not into this.
Yeah, it was kind of like I was going into it thinking they weren't disclosing the salary in the job ad, like the range. So I was going into, thinking, okay, we'll just see what happens. And yeah, the interview went well. Had conversations with them. It came down to the salary, and I was like, whoa, I didn't know it was gonna be that low. It's like, I know. So it was pretty much like half. It was half I was making at the first job that I had. So it was like, yeah,
probably
it was not
probably not. So yeah, that was back for us. Like I think we folded our doors, closed our doors, folded our shop. I don't know. The metaphors are escaping me. But that was back in, I want to say 2003. So we were kind of like right in that place where there weren't the big hosts.
Mm-hmm.
Like now, I mean, hosting is a commodity, right? We were there where you could be like a boutique host. We actually had a T1 line coming into a bunch of servers. And that was our, we were hosting on a T1 line. And the fact that you could actually host on a T1 line says a lot, because you can't do that now. That's for sure. But yep. Yeah, it was an interesting time. But as you were saying,
so getting back to this week,
which was a really good week,
was an amazing week, Tim, and I think that you'll be happy to hear.
I'm so happy already
that I finally come back to the land of IDEs.
Oh, wait. Oh yeah, because you've just been using Emacs.
Been using my Doom Emacs, which is Emacs with Vim emulation, configured
with your GitHub Copilot.
Oh yes.
Plugin, so you can have all
my
of
best
the
friend,
copyright code for other people.
Yes, exactly. I want to pull all that copyright code into my programs. Yeah, that's my goal.
Teach students how to pirate other people's software. So yeah,
because even though I care about my own privacy, I don't care about licenses.
That's right. Okay.
But it was interesting. We even had many conversations about the JetBrains products.
Mm-hmm.
And I used them a while ago back on Windows, and it always felt like a little bit slow and clunky because it's built in Java, and I was like, just on Windows, and that was also
Windows,
it was also a few years ago. So
what were you using the IDE then? Were you using one of the?
I tried out. Well, I tried.
PyCharm?
I was just using basically just IntelliJ and then just installing plugins with it. So just using the base, and then I was trying that out, and like I said, I liked it because it reminded me of Visual Studio, and I was like, oh yeah, it's kind of nice IDE, but it just felt kind of slow and clunky, and just kind of like it just didn't feel right to me, because that's the one thing I love about my code editing, it needs to be fast.
It needs to be fast.
Like my fingers need to flow over the keyboard like butter, Tim.
The thoughts from Mark's mind have to hit the
needs to go so smoothly
page without any hesitation.
You need to get in the flow. Whatever can enable me to get in the flow, I'm.
And by flow, he means I tab, and
exactly.
get Copilot. Just
Copilot, yes.
Yeah.
The more that I can get in sync with Copilot, the better I am, right? So I've been using
between tab and someone else's poorly licensed code coming on to my screen.
So I've been using Doom Emacs with Copilot because there's a great developer who converted the NeoVim plugin that I don't know if GitHub actually made themselves or somebody else made them for them, but it's the plugin for Vim that they advertise on the Copilot website. They made a version of it for Emacs, and it works great. It is a little bit slow though, so it's like once I start fighting with the tabs or fighting with the completions, as in like, okay, I go to the new line, makes a suggestion, and then you ever get in the mode with like auto completion where like if you don't accept the completion, it gets kind of angry at you, like you're trying to like back out of the completion. Maybe you've never seen this before, but that was starting to happen.
I just keep typing.
Like with the Vim emulation in Emacs with the Copilot, it sometimes gives me suggestions. If I go and I put the cursor into the next line, and if I don't accept it, I have to like get out of it. I have to hit escape. I go back like a bunch of times, and it was just I was fighting with it.
I feel like this is I'm trying to make Vim an IDE problem, and most developers may not be.
So I was starting to deal with this more and more. And it was starting to a little bit annoy me, and I was like, oh, this is kind of strange and weird, and also I realized too there were some plugins that I had activated in Emacs was probably also causing it to be slow, and just a combination of plugins I think was just the performance. But so I thought like I was working on this 2D style platformer game template for my object-oriented programming class. We're kind of wrapping up the semester. I'm giving them some good examples of like different game style games written in PyCharm, just giving kind of like boilerplate code, just saying, okay, if you're going to do like a tile map, like a sprite-based tile map on the screen, or if then you're going to have characters moving around the screen and provide some collision and just show some basic mechanics, right? So I've been kind of putting together some examples, and I was working on this pretty good sized template. I was like, I kind of need to really pound through this. So I was like, let me just try a different idea and see how this, So downloaded PyCharm Professional, and since I'm an educator, I can get this for free, which is great.
Free, yeah,
it's amazing. Yeah. Like, why not?
It's the right price for Mark.
And since I'm on Linux now, I'm starting to use it. I was like, whoa. This is a completely different experience.
Blazingly fast.
And I was using it on just my low-powered Windows Surface Go, and it was so fast. And I was like, wow. It's like I could have like two columns, two viewport
Split the
pans,
pane, yeah,
split
yeah,
the
yeah.
pans, yeah. And it was going back and forth between them. Code was smooth, and also the GitHub Copilot integration is so much nicer.
You can tab your way to
Oh
code
my
success.
gosh. And I'm not fighting with it. I'm not struggling with it. So it brought me back to the idea. And then I started remembering too, once because I started working on this kind of not a complicated system, but like I said, I started working on, let's say, an application that has like, let's say 10 different classes. Some are base classes that are being inherited by other classes.
This is the template that you're putting together for your students. Okay.
So I started making like a sprite sheet class, a sprite class, and the sprite class would be like a base class for like character sprites or even like wall sprites. And it was kind of like I was starting to kind of build a lot of relationships because I want to show that to the students how you can design or architect a game using object-oriented patterns. And so I was starting to also like remembering too, like when you're working in IDE, you can set breakpoints. And you can run it, you can debug it, and you could actually see the flow of the data. Because like I started starting to work it out some like weird like timing. Like when I would do like a sprite animation, I had to do like frame by frame animation and then keep track of the time in between the frames. And so I had to kind of using the time object with Pygame, just knowing how that's being calculated, and just so I can kind of keep track of that number and also set my own counters. I just need to know the data, like and it's hard for me to see that just by printing out, doing print statements or debugging that way.
Just see that, be able to inspect the
set a
entire
breakpoint.
object. Yeah.
Set a breakpoint and then drill down in the stack and see where all the data is flowing through the properties. I was like, oh my! It's like I'm back home. I'm back home in Visual Studio days. So that's what I loved about Visual Studio. Was the debugging.
Step debugging. If you're a developer and you've never enabled step debugging in whatever your platform is, and more than likely, if you have a platform you're working on, you should be able to get step debugging work. If you've never done it, it will change the way that you view being able to program and debug. And it's not just so much debug. It's like even understand what's going on. The fact that you can step through the code and see it change, especially when it's library code, like what you're saying about using the time object. When it's somebody else's code, instead of having to read through and understand how it works, you can just observe how it works and say, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. But
I mostly been doing over the past few years, just mostly been doing front end code with JavaScript. We're using the developer tools, the inspector on the browser. I can kind of do the same thing.
Yeah,
and that's why
you can set breakpoints.
And so it's been a while since I did like a good kind of doing a lot of either server side or compiled applications, or even like I guess Python's type application is more of a server side. It's not compiled.
Yeah, it's not good.
But it just kind of, once you start building larger systems like that, like I said, it's so much to kind of trying to work out, how the data is moving through the application and how to keep track of that. And you need a system or a tool to actually do that. So yeah, I'm back on the IDs. I'm loving it. I'm using WebStorm now too for my front end stuff. So
look at that.
I love it, Tim. Another thing also I realized this week too.
Use Sea Lion when you get back to your C++.
When I get back to maybe the summer, I'm probably gonna do that over summer, like or maybe the break. I don't know. But yeah, once I have, because it doesn't really fall in line with what I teach right now.
Right.
So I'm really just focusing on my side projects are usually just kind of in line with what I'm teaching, so my brain doesn't explode.
Because I don't think anybody's ever used C or C++ to do an object-oriented game. So that's, I think, a good decision there.
But another thing also, I was starting to get a weird feeling about. This is the first time this week that I started to get a little bit uncomfortable with not having types, static types, or defined types
in Python.
Yeah, and usually with my experience with PHP, Python, Ruby, it's kind of I've been kind of like, and even JavaScript too, just kind of flow with its system of its kind of dynamic type system and just kind of let it kind of manage, do its thing, trust in it, have faith in it. And then I started to feel like, okay, once I'm like sending these more complex data objects like these. Like a multi-dimensional array, or like having that maybe has objects inside of it, and
you want to be able to define the structure, right?
And I was like, or even just when I would be passing in arguments to methods from another class, either by using composition, bringing the object, and then passing in data back to it, just trusting that it just is going to do its thing, or just with the type, or just kind of keep track of the type safety of it, or with that. And I started to get a little bit uncomfortable, and it started making me think about how
familiar with Python here. You can't do any type of type hinting on arguments or declarations.
You could do you could do some decorators and stuff like that, but I was like, just like with
the code, you can't say just how type of object.
It works like just like JavaScript. Really, with JavaScript, you have TypeScript, where you have these type systems built on top of it.
Yeah,
these kind of pre. That's word, not a pre-compilation. but these systems that basically will do
Just
type
use like
checking.
annotations to say this is what it should be.
Yeah, yeah. And so you could,
And
but I was just thinking just out of the box, and I was thinking about how like I just didn't. It started to make me feel like a little bit uncomfortable just trying to trusting in a dynamic type system. Have you ever kind of felt that with PHP, or how do you deal with that with PHP?
well, I mean, PHP has types.
I don't know. I didn't ever use them. When I use PHP, I didn't use types.
It's been a while, Mark. It's been a while. We have types.
Back in the PHP 4 days, I think.
So
back.
we can declare the types of arguments. We can declare the types, the return types of methods.
Is it an optional type system where you
is.
can't? Okay. See, that's what I kind of.
You don't have to. And then PHP 8 gives us union types, where we can say it is one of these two. Without union types, you'd have to do something weird like say, hey, just create an interface that both of them implement. So they, even though the interface may not have any actual methods, just a way to say, oh, or I'm going to return this, which then two things implement it. So it's one of those two. But no, we can now do union types. I think both for return statements and type declarations and things like that.
Yeah, you could do you could do it
We
like
can even
with,
hint on scalars.
yeah. No, yeah, that's the thing is you could do it with with Python. Like I said, the hinting of the Python, you could do that. And like I said, I just for some reason, I guess maybe because a lot of from when you're teaching Python, like I said, and it's more about the type inference. Like when you declare a variable and that variable gets signed a type in a sense, that type is for that variable is then defined by how the value is being assigned, right?
Oh, because you say this variable is.
So if you have like you assign
yeah.
a variable an integer and then you then try to assign it a string, it then will cause a type conflict because the type of that variable is defined by the initial assignment.
See, we don't even have that. Like you could do that. You could change the type of a variable, but then it would break if you tried to pass it to an argument or to a method that expected it to be the first type.
Oh, no, I'm just talking about just assigning value or changing the type based on the value.
Yeah. So we can do that, but like if you can say in a method, like if I'm passing data to a method and the method declares that yes, this variable must be of type something, then I feel like in the scope of whatever method you're working on, if you're changing the type of that variable, you know it. If you don't, you don't.
Or maybe my issue is like I said, it's not because like I said, you do have the hinting for when you're defining functions or methods and then define the type of what's for the arguments or what's going to be returned from that function. You can do that. Maybe my thing is like I liked, because I spent a good amount of time with C and C++ for last summer, was that just when you initially declare a variable, having that type defined.
You know what type it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I think
that because
I think that's what I'm getting back to, of thinking like, okay, going back to that way of thinking of like when that variable is defined or that property is defined, that type is defined too at that moment. I think that's what I'm kind of thinking like, oh, it's like if that going back to that way of programming just feels safe or just feels like, a little bit more reliable in a sense.
Because you can't change it, but I mean, if you're the one that's changing it, I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's just my own. I guess I'm going back and forth between this. I don't know, Tim. I don't know.
Mark doesn't know, folks.
I don't know.
Mark doesn't know. But has your IDE helped you with your typing?
It was. Maybe that's why, because like I said, getting back to IDEs and then really kind of drilling down into the values that's being passed to the stack and being passed to the properties. And I was just making me think about, I was like, I needed that. Once I did the debugging, it kind of solved my problems. And then it made me think about, well, if I had the types defined initially when these properties are declared, it would actually just make me just feel a little bit more short, especially if I know that, okay, if I'm passing that value into that method, that it matches up with that property's type. I don't know. It was just a feeling that I got back, the fact of like, okay, it's going back and forth between a dynamic type system and then a static type system, kind of seeing the differences and kind of my own comfort level between the two. Because I think maybe the older that I get, the more I care about types in a sense.
Okay.
Back when I was first programming and learning, that's a benefit too. I think why, schools teach JavaScript or the schools teach Python or these dynamic languages or PHP, but with the sense of like, okay, students don't have to get bogged down too much in a type system, even though they have to understand what types are.
Right,
but not being not being a requirement of within it, because it lowers the complexity of learning the language or learning how to program, and then you can layer in the type system over top of that.
Yeah, that certainly does, I think, decrease the or Yeah. Lower, like you say, lower the barrier to entry. But and even in PHP, you can declare the type of properties on an object. So you can say, my class is going to have this property called user, and then it's going to be of type user. And you can't, you'll know that that's always either going to be a user, or if you
Yeah.
call it
Yeah.
and it's not a user, you're going to
Okay.
get an undefined variable. It has to be set before you can access it, type of a thing. And you could never say, oh, like let's just make the user a string. Nope, can't change. But a variable by itself, for sure. A variable you can just change whatever it's set to by assignment.
Yeah. No. So like I said, kind of just thinking back how, when I was learning about programming and learning about types, just kind of brought me back to the fact of like, yeah, I think we should probably encourage more kind of type declaration.
Well, yeah, isn't that the whole point of
Which
TypeScript
is,
and things like that, to
yeah,
add it to
that's
languages that don't have it?
well, that's also interesting too. Yeah, I do like TypeScript, but the fact of I don't like how it is like another layer system over top of JavaScript, or it's like it's not the nice thing about JavaScript. It just runs in the browser. Right now, there is a proposal for building in optional types into the ECMAScript.
Yeah.
And so it's a proposal right now, so it's not implemented, and that I fully support. And eventually they'll probably will get there, because then like once types are then recognized within the browser, because the one thing I don't like about TypeScript, it is this another system that you have to add to your kind of your development stack. And I wish it was the nice thing about JavaScript is it's just JavaScript, right? It just runs in the browser. That's the way it should be.
Right.
That's also why I kind of like, pre-compiled JavaScript. I used to be like a CoffeeScript fan back in the Ruby days. Remember CoffeeScript?
I kind of remember CoffeeScript, yeah.
And I was like, I liked it. It was kind of cool, because it's kind of like sort of like turned JavaScript into Python in a way.
And
So
then it would just compile down.
But then it's like it's another compiling system where you have
Right.
to, it compiles it down to JavaScript, and then it's just another layer of complexity that you add to it. And so I got away from that.
There was a version, or like that concept for PHP once. I think it was called PHP Snow or something like that. I don't think it ever got any
PHP Snow.
Yeah. And then we compile it down to PHP. I don't even remember what they're trying to accomplish, but it's another story for another day.
So yes, I'm back in the world of IDEs. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm on Linux. I'm a bit amazed too. Like it's interesting too to see.
Are you finding that the IDE helps you though with like the type stuff?
No, exactly. That's what it made me start to think about that. Once I
Right.
started to drill into the types of my properties by debugging it, and I was like, oh, it's like it just made me think back about my journey of developing and kind of going back and forth between primarily using dynamic languages, and then but going back to my days with Visual Studio and using C# and then also with Java, and spending some time with C++ over the summer, kind of made me kind of think about the pros and cons of the type system, like because it is a little bit more work up front, how you have to kind of plan out and define your types, and then to make that as part of your design of your application. And then when you're on a dynamic language, it's an optional thing. You don't have to do it. You can just let it kind of just do its thing and manage it for you. But then that could also create more bugs, which that's why you need an ID to start stepping through and debugging your application, so you can kind of figure out where the issues are. But I think thinking about when I was working with the static types and defining those up front, then it seems like it felt like a little bit more straightforward in a sense. I think that's what I mean. Like the kind of the path of where I was trying to go, it just made it a little bit more streamlined, where I didn't have to do as much, still to do debugging, but it just felt like from a developer kind of experience and planning out the application, how I'm going to be writing it, then it just felt like a little bit more safe in a sense, because that's what it is, right? Type safe.
Yeah. No, I love the type support that PHP has. I also like the dynamic part of it.
Yeah.
But
that's what I love. Yeah, I hope they build that into JavaScript too, because I think making it as an optional thing, I think that's good. Still keeping it dynamic, but then making it an optional where you can enforce it when you want to. That'll be good when they add that.
And I feel like, without a whole lot of knowledge behind the scenes, but I feel like that comes from the interpreted versus the compiled down part of things. When you're kind of running in memory. Well, that's probably the wrong way to say it, but that idea. That's why we have that. Dynamic languages are dynamic. Well, yeah, but yeah, love types, and I know we embrace those as much as possible. There's a couple places where the dynamic stuff actually is helpful, because we can. Well, that's probably the wrong way to say it. we can have interfaces that just say, well, you're going to get back an object. We're not going to know what,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
that this is a more of a generic concept where you're going to give me some very specific inputs, but the output is really depending on the context of those things, and we don't
You're
know, and we
doing
don't want to declare it.
you doing some type of like any object or something like that.
Yeah, it's just like you know you're going to get an
Like you know
object
it's an
back.
object, but you don't know what it is, and
Because it
really.
doesn't really matter. It's like one
Yeah.
of those things where it's going to be a thing that comes from the database, and whoever we pass this to is going to understand what it is. Sure, we could come up with an interface and be like, "Hey, it's an entity object," but that's still not going
Yeah.
to really give us a whole lot more.
Yeah.
It's just going to make us go through and add that interface because it doesn't. It's just the type of thing that it is. It's not declaring that it has this any common methods or anything like that. It's just, hey, it's the thing from the database. It's the user, or it's
Mm-hmm.
or it's the
Mm-hmm.
comment, or it's the thing, and you're going to give me some very specific arguments in this context, and I'm going to say, oh, based off that, I'm going to find the user you're talking about. Well, another class says I'm going to find the comment you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the interface? Well, the interface is this thing returns an object. We could or the type the return type is going to be, well, it's an object. Um, we could add some more type safety to it, but like I said, it's going to just be an empty interface because we're not saying that you can call anything on any of those objects. We're just saying it's that kind of thing you're going to get back, and whoever's using this is going to know whether or not it's
Mm-hmm.
what they want. And we do a type check there, though.
Yeah.
We'll actually do a type check, like say, hey, is this an instance of this thing? If not, something went wrong, and we're done. So.
I guess because I was like, trying to struggle with how to put together my emotions and thoughts over this week about realizing that I actually like static types more than dynamic types is the fact like teaching this course, teaching Python
Mhm.
is like I said, and from the textbook that I use, we definitely talk about types in the beginning, saying, okay, we declare a variable, how does it manage the type of based on the assigned value, and kind of make sure students understand the difference between an integer, string, or an array, or like understand a boolean, just understand the basic types of what it is. But then trying to also to manage keeping the syntax straightforward and simple, because when you do specify, like say the return types or the types of the properties, you are adding a little bit more complexity to the syntax of what you're asking them to write. I think that's why I didn't do it as much in the beginning. Now I'm thinking back now and towards the end, like, oh, should I spend a little bit more time when you teach the Python syntax, when I'm teaching how to write this function, how to define the arguments of the function, and should you spend a little more time saying, okay, these are the types of the arguments, and then also the return types of what's going to come out of this method, what's going to be returned,
Right.
instead of just letting the student trust that the language itself, or the compiler, or the runtime is going to just kind of manage that and with them, because I don't feel students take that next step with like understanding.
Because
What
you start off simple. It's like, here's a variable. You're assigning it to an int. Now you know that the variable is an int. But and you can have a class. Let's say a property is count, and we're just gonna say it's count, and it happens to be an int because you're using ints, but you didn't declare that it was an int.
Yeah.
Although you could.
So
Yeah,
thinking
it
about
does make it easier for you just to think about variables being buckets for data, and
Yeah.
not the thing of, well, it's a certain kind of data now because we've declared that property to be of a certain type, or methods accepting arguments versus typed arguments is yet another step. But hopefully, I don't know how to.
Well, where was you in your system, like, or in your system, in your journey as a developer, where you felt like, okay, this, like, I should really starting to think about types in a sense. It should be a really high level of importance when I'm developing and programming.
Well, I mean, I would use the instance of check before PHP allowed types to be declared in the method signatures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say, we're gonna accept this thing, but we're gonna check, is it an instance of that? I can't just trust that it is,
Yeah,
because
yep.
I need to know. And then once they started allowing us to do that, and actually declare the types that are arguments in a method, I was like, this is great.
So it's
And
pretty much how the language evolved. You kind of evolved with it in a sense.
a little bit, yeah. But I mean, I think I would say that the understanding of the importance was ahead of the curve there, and that's probably why, like, as developers, we understand that, and we're like, maybe our language should support
Yeah.
this, right? Because we did have the check to say, hey, is it an instance of something? And we may have that in the code. Say, hey, do something if it's this instance of this, do this. If it's an instance of that, do that. So that I know it's important for my code to know what these types are. Having objects that, and that's the other thing too. that varies from language to language a little bit. I'm just trying to think through this. Like, no, that may not be a good example. It's how the language, and you're right. In this way, it's like kind of how the language evolves. Because in PHP, you can just set a property even if it doesn't exist, and you're fine. Now, if you declare the type of the property, now you actually can only set it to that type. So for years, there was a bias towards using getters and setters that would do nothing but type safety. So
okay.
I wanna set this to a user, right? A user object. So I'd have a setter that says set user, pass it, declare that it's a user, it's $ user, and then in the method signature, it's going to be this user equals user.
That could be a good compromise, yeah, because I spent a good amount of time doing that. It's talking about the that encapsulation method, doing the getters and setters, but enforcing the types with those. That could actually
But now PHP allows you to set the type of a public property. So you could just have a class that says, I'm going to define that I have a user property. It's going to be public, and I'm going to declare that it is a user. So now it can be set, and it can be gotten, and it can be changed just like you would do normally, but only with the user. So we're able to somehow to get rid of some of that boilerplate code that was around just to add type safety to changing the property of an object. We can say, oh, what this property is essentially public. Because our getters and our setters are just return the value of it and set the value of it. We're not doing any other checks on it. And that's actually why, now you're coming from a .NET background a little bit. .NET has the getters and setters built into the properties. I forget what they call those, but you define the property and you can divide a getter or setter for it. I love that. That's been proposed a couple times for PHP. I wish it would be adopted, but one of the reasons I heard as to why it more than likely will not be is because the big use of that in the minds of some is to protect type safety. And now we can type our public properties. So what's the point? So then if you really need to do some other checks, some other sanity checks before setting the data, then just make an actual setter. Though I did love what was it? It's the fact that you expose it as a public property. I'm just going to, in .NET, right? You can just say, whatever your object is, dot the property. And when you set it, it would still call the setter.
Yeah.
And it might validate it for you, but getting wouldn't do anything because it could just give it to you. Or maybe getting does something like says, hey, if it's not set it to a same default and then return it. And you wouldn't need to have both a getter and a setter if setting was simple or getting was simple, but the other one, the other mechanism needed some additional code. You could just do it. I loved that concept that .NET has. I would love it to be in PHP, but one of the reasons I think we may never get it is because now we have type public properties, so we can at least do the type safety check without any need of any extra methods. If you need to do some other check, well, then use a getter and setter. Where that breaks down for me, though, is you have an object now that maybe some of the properties you can just access directly because, hey, we have type safety, but other things you'd have to go through a getter because, oh, we have to do something special for that. I would much like to have an object that had what basically said, here's all the things I expose publicly, and if there needs to be some logic, it's tucked away and you don't even see it.
I think that's a really good compromise because I did enjoy teaching the with getters and setters. I think I finally got them to understand why having like private properties and getters and setters is important. I think I finally got the students to that point, but maybe layering a type declaration or on top of that with the getters and setters.
Say you don't need it now.
It's a good compromise. Yeah.
If you because I don't know because does Python have the type declaration on public properties like that?
What do you? That's a good. I don't think so.
Okay, so that's
no. Basically, everything's public.
Okay.
So that's also a reason why. Like I'm enforcing when I teach encapsulation. That's why Python's a weird language to do it because everything's public.
Oh, you can just access anything.
You can just do it. Yeah.
Can you put a type on a property of a class?
I don't. You can define the types, like I said, either with for your arguments and also your return types.
Can you set the types of the properties of a class?
No.
See, because that would be a great reason.
Because, like I said, the types implied by the assignment. So if you want to like I said, if you want to make a Boolean, then you basically set it to be false or true. Yeah.
Right. But you can't declare that property is true.
No.
And I feel like that's like I can do that in PHP, and that to me works well to say, oh, look at this getter and setter that is enforcing type safety, and then that's all it's doing. Let's just take it away and say, from the class perspective, this property must be of a certain type, and then you can say, oh, look at the value of typing the property. Now you don't even have to worry about this boilerplate getter setter code. And maybe and then you have because that's the other thing that's nice, and I can kind of see where you're going now, because that's not in my mind. Like, even internal properties for classes in PHP, I can rely on internal properties always being a type, because I can declare that type. And what you're saying, I guess, is what if something changes it, especially if you're saying they're public? What in the world? There's no safety whatsoever there. So now I'm starting to understand where your mind's coming from in Python, because I'm thinking if you can say, as I pass a method, this is the type, but I'm missing that you can't protect your internal types.
Yeah. Or you have to build a type check yourself. It'll be an extra function or method, like a type of, or so you have to call, or you did
every time you use it,
enforce it,
because you can't trust that it wasn't changed by somebody outside of your
yeah, because that's why like I said, I try to teach how the textbook's laid out, so when students are reading the textbook, they see it's a kind of a one-to-one, and then I then add layers of complexity on top of that with my own examples. Like I said, I first teach them how, like, okay, when you first instantiate an object, you can say, assign it to a variable, instantiate an object, and then just do dot, reference the property, assign new value, boom, you're done. And then it doesn't really matter at all, right? And I think they can understand, because they can, students, especially at this course, they definitely understand assignment of value, and I think they take the next step, assignment of an object, then they get that, but then accessing a property of that object and then assigning a value takes them a little bit to get that to understand how that property is
reach into it.
Yes, and then Python just lets you do it without it's just there's no private, everything's public inside of it. So what I do is I teach encapsulation by enforcing, saying, okay, when you define your properties with the syntax, do a little double underscore, to define it, so it's like a private property, even though in a sense it's not a private property behind the scenes,
right? But yeah,
and then enforce, say, okay, then if you want to change the value, you have to make a set method. If you want to get the value, do a get method, and then kind of show them those patterns. I think I finally got them there, but then I started to realize at the end, well, then there's this whole type thing that I really did spend too much time on when it comes to these getters and setters and changing the properties values. And so, like I said, it was just kind of a realization of like, wow, should I have spent a little bit more time? But I think what you mentioned, what we were kind of talking through about, maybe layering that on with the getters and setters would be a good compromise. Yeah.
And what would be interesting, like, to teach them, I mean, we learn from seeing, I joked about this on Twitter the other day, John Kern, who's, for those in our local tech group, probably may have remembered.
Yeah, John Kern. I see him on when I'm occasionally on Twitter. I see him kind of pop up there.
We're doing some agile consulting with him, and one of the things is, and I'm taking this a little bit out of context, but the idea of it's, don't say failure, say learned, right? It's not that you failed, that you learned. And there are some days I realize I had learned a lot the day before, but we learned through that. So introducing a bug where you reach in and change the type of a protected property or something like that could be a way to say, hey, see how important this is?
Yeah.
See, like, because now it's no longer an int, it's a string, and then you get weird behavior because it's trying to do, I don't know if Python tries to cast strings into ints when you use them or something like that. You just get some weird behavior because it's the wrong type. You can be like, well, that's
will get type errers. No, you will get type errors. That's what I'm saying. It does have, from an error system, it does have type. That's most errors you get is type errors.
That's most the errors
because the value of the type is defined when you assign an object or you define a type based on the assignment. It has a type.
It won't try to cast anything if you're like, hey, I want to add this not like string JavaScript to this number.
Yeah, it's not like JavaScript, which will just be kind of loosey goosey and let you do whatever you want to do.
Or PHP, we will totally do that. We'll be like, add a string to a number. Why not? Yeah, I can figure that out. Sure, it's 3.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of it's a balancing act. Teaching programming is hard because it's kind of a balancing act of how much complexity do you introduce at certain points. Because one thing I was talking about with my students this week, I was like, I don't want them to leave my courses ever think that they didn't learn anything. I hate hearing about how developers go to college and they say, oh, I learned all about programming after I got out of college. My first couple jobs. That's where I learned. Really college, I didn't really learn anything.
Yep.
And I was like, okay. I can kind of understand it because, when I went to college, what the benefit I saw from my kind of computer science classes with the fact, like, it taught me how to think like a programmer. Like it prepared me for learning about programming and learning how to be a developer. And I think it kind of laid some of the foundations. Now, some of the practical stuff, yes, I didn't learn that till I got out of it. So what I do with my classes now, I try to like show them as much practical code as I can, saying when you get in the real world, this is the type of programming you're going to be faced with, these type of problems you're going to be faced with. So just so they can see it, so they can have some experience with it, because I want them to leave knowing that, have a little bit of value there, right? So it's a balancing act of how much complexity do I introduce them, in my classes, because I also don't want to overload them, because I could tell too, once I start, when I start doing multidimensional arrays, their heads start to explode. When I start doing
those are one of those things where when you first approach it until you get it, and then once you get it, you're like, okay.
And then doing like an inner for loop, like an inner loop, for doing iteration, and which I have to do
over a multidimensional array.
In games, you have to do that.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
those are the two things.
Yeah.
Dealing with multidimensional arrays and dealing with inner inner loops, you just have to do that, right? There's no other way to do it, especially with you're kind of trying to keep track of
build a Minesweeper game. Like that's the core of a Minesweeper game, right? Is just going over a grid using a loop and a loop.
Well, it's interesting too. I show them how to build like a tile map using like basically like a multidimensional array and storing the values there, and kind of keeping track of multiple arrays, and then be able to keep everything in sync of which is at what point in the grid. And I could tell that was kind of blowing their mind a little bit and kind of understanding how to do that. But like I said, it's kind of a very practical thing to kind of understand and know how to program. So,
all right, we've got 3 minutes left. I got one question for you. Have you ever read, I know this is a total topic shift, but relevant due to recent news. Have you ever read The Mythical Man Month?
I've read parts of it.
You've read parts
of it? I've read the whole book, yeah.
So it's not that big of a book.
Well, like I said, I've read piece. Like I said, I've got the ebook version. I've read kind of parts, because when people reference it, I'm curious. Yeah, but I haven't sat down and read the whole book.
Yeah. That's your homework for next week.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that. Here's why. Well, the author of the book, Fred Brooks. Fred Brooks died apparently. I don't know if it was early this morning or late last night.
Oh, that was like the UNC professor, right? I saw that come up on the news, right?
Yeah. I mean, his thoughts. I mean, how long ago was the Mythical Man Month written? I don't even remember.
I haven't thought about it since you just mentioned it here, because when I saw that he died, I saw that came up on the news thread. I totally did not connect that he was one that wrote that. I was like,
and looking at software development and his thoughts and perspective and actually kind of really research on how changing team size and whether or not just adding more developers to a problem made it easier, for the Mythical Man Month. There's huge body of work and an impressive person.
So I wonder if Elon
he would
Musk
have been one of those people, like if you say, hey, would you like to go, what 3 people would you want to eat dinner with? Like those types of questions. Okay. Yeah. He would have been or was on like that mental list of mine. So I think he would have been a really interesting person to talk to. But
so I wonder if Elon Musk is a big proponent of the Mythical Man Month.
Apparently his perspective is we have a very big problem to solve. Let's not throw more developers at it. Let's throw less.
That's right.
Let's throw less developers, and that'll work, I am sure. So yeah.
Well, it will be interesting to see. Final note about Twitter.
There's no final note about Twitter until that
what
site
if Twitter is just real, like what they're saying, it's really just running on fumes. Like nobody's managing the wheel. Like you log onto Twitter and you're tweeting away and just nobody is managing the system anymore. So it's just running on its own. It's become, what's the word?
Sentient? AI. Is that what you're saying?
It's become sentient because the developers have left it on its own.
That's all it would take. That was the big gap. It's not that machines haven't been able to become sentient.
We just need to let them go.
We haven't taken hands off. Now we have.
This is a great experiment. I'm looking forward to seeing how Twitter will evolve and become a big Twitter.
I, for one, am looking forward to some more well-designed fail whales. It has been so long since I've seen it. When was the last time you saw a fail whale in the wild?
It's been a while, but now that the AI is in control of Twitter,
who knows?
What kind of crazy fail whales could there be? That could be amazing. Every time you see a fail whale, it's a different fail whale.
I will tell you, I used to see fail whales all the time, and sorry Microsoft for this, but I see them on GitHub the GitHub Octocat,
yep,
500 errors, far more than I ever see any fail whales.
It's true.
So,
it's true.
but that may be about to change. That may be about to change. Well, let's see. Next week, should we do a Black Friday episode?
Oh yeah, we could. I'll be around.
Yeah,
Not going
Black
anywhere.
Friday. That's it. You heard it here first. Episode 44 of the Dev Friday show will have amazing Black Friday deals. So
Amazing.
you'll want to be in line for the stream early to make sure you're the first in, just to see the incredible content we have for you post Thanksgiving. Oh, I guess I should ask the other question. Does that mean we bring out the Christmas bumper next week?
Oh, we should. Well, and I'm a big proponent of not celebrating Christmas until after Thanksgiving, even though every year people love to like get out there. In my neighborhood, there's multiple houses that brought their Christmas lights right after Halloween.
Right after Halloween?
They swapped out their Halloween decorations with Christmas lights, and I was like, oh my gosh.
There you go. I actually have to run to another meeting because
All right.
today's booked, but let me just see if I can find it real quick. What's this? What does it sound? Oh, this? Yeah, remember this one?
It's the Dev Friday show with Mark and
Well, you
Tim.
paid $5 for it today.
It's the Dev Friday before Christmas. And that's all you get for $5.
All right. That's what we may look. We'll see. I'm gonna